The Last Olympian. The end of the world began on Percy Jackson's 16th birthday. The August heat shimmered over the streets of New York City as Percy stood on the observation deck of the Empire State Building, his sea-green eyes scanning the horizon. The city seemed peaceful, oblivious to the war that was about to engulf it. Beside him, Annabeth Chase fidgeted with her Yankees cap, her stormy gray eyes narrowed in concentration. "Any sign of them?" she asked, her voice tense. Percy shook his head. "Nothing yet. But they're coming. I can feel it." As if on cue, a chill ran down his spine. In the distance, a dark shape appeared in the sky, growing larger by the second. Kronos' army had arrived. "It's time," Percy said, uncapping Riptide. The celestial bronze blade sprang to life in his hands, its familiar weight both comforting and terrifying. Annabeth nodded, drawing her own weapon. "Let's go save the world." Again. As they descended to street-level camp, Half-Blood's defenders rushed to their positions. The Apollo cabin took up sniper positions on rooftops, while the Ours kids fortified barricades. Satyrs and nature spirits emerged from Central Park, ready to defend their urban territory. Percy found himself at the forefront, leading a group of demigods towards the Brooklyn Bridge. The first wave of Kronos' army was landing a horde of monsters, led by the Titan Hyperion himself. The clash of battle was immediate and brutal. Percy fought like a whirlwind, Riptide, slicing through monsters as if they were made of paper. Beside him, Annabeth was a blur of motion, her knife finding chinks in the enemy's armor with deadly precision. But for every monster they cut down, two more seemed to take its place. The defenders were pushed back, inch by bloody inch, towards the heart of Manhattan. As Percy battled Hyperion on the reservoir in Central Park, he caught glimpses of the larger conflict unfolding around him. Thalia Grace and her hunters rained silver arrows from the rooftops. Grover's nature spirits entangled monsters in vines and roots. And in the sky, Pegasi engaged in aerial combat with enemy flying creatures. The fight with Hyperion was like battling a supernova. The Titan's light was blinding, his heat scorching. But Percy had faced gods before. Drawing on the power of the nearby water, he encased Hyperion in a swirling whirlpool, freezing him in place long enough for Grover to complete an ancient woodland magic, turning the Titan into a maple tree. But there was no time to celebrate. A bone-chilling roar echoed through the city, and Percy's blood ran cold. He knew that sound. Typhon, the most terrible monster in Greek mythology, had broken free of his underground prison. As night fell, the defenders regrouped at the Empire State Building, the modern-day entrance to Mount Olympus. Percy's heart sank as he saw how few of them remained. Many had fallen in battle, while others were scattered across the city, fighting pockets of resistance. In a moment of quiet, Annabeth found Percy on the observation deck once more. Her face was streaked with grime and blood, but her eyes were as fierce as ever. "How are you holding up, Seaweed Brain?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. Percy managed a weak smile. "Oh, you know. Just another day of trying not to die horribly." Annabeth punched his arm lightly, but there was no real force behind it. They stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the battle-scarred city. "Percy," Annabeth said finally, "about the prophecy. I want you to know that whatever happens—" But her words were cut off by a deafening explosion. The elevator doors burst open, and out stepped Luke Castellan, or rather, the body of Luke, now fully possessed by the spirit of Kronos. The Titan Lord's golden eyes fixed on Percy, a cruel smile twisting Luke's once handsome features. "At last," Kronos said, his voice like a knife scraping over stone. "The final battle begins." What followed was a fight unlike any Percy had experienced before. Kronos' control over time made him nearly impossible to hit, while every strike of his scythe seemed to age the things it touched by decades. As they fought, Percy became acutely aware of the prophecy that had haunted him for years. A half-blood of the eldest gods shall reach 16 against all odds, and see the world in endless sleep. The hero's soul, cursed blade shall reap. A single choice shall end his days, Olympus to preserve or raise. Each line seemed to echo in his mind as he parried and struck, desperately trying to find a weakness in Kronos' defense. But the Titan Lord was too strong, too fast. Just when all seemed lost, help arrived from an unexpected quarter. Hades, Lord of the Underworld, burst onto the scene with an army of the dead. The tide of battle shifted once more, but Percy knew it was only a temporary reprieve. As dawn broke over New York, Percy found himself cornered on Olympus itself. The marble streets were cracked and broken, the golden palaces of the gods in ruins. And there, in the throne room of the Olympians, Percy faced his final confrontation with Kronos. But something had changed. Luke's body was fighting against Kronos' control, the human part of him reasserting itself in moments of lucidity. Percy realized with a jolt that the cursed blade of the prophecy wasn't Kronos' scythe, it was Luke's own sword backbiter. In a desperate gamble, Percy handed Luke Annabeth's knife, the weapon Luke had given her years ago. With a final, Herculean effort, Luke drove the blade into his own armpit, his Achilles' heel, destroying Kronos' essence and himself in the process. As Luke lay dying, he extracted a final promise from Percy: to make the gods claim all their children, to prevent another generation of demigods from feeling abandoned and resentful. With Kronos defeated and the Olympians returning to power, Percy was offered a gift beyond measure: godhood. But in that moment, looking at his friends, who had fought and bled beside him, Percy made his choice. He declined immortality, instead asking the gods to recognize all their children, and to pardon the minor gods and peaceful titans who had sided with Kronos. As the summer drew to a close and Camp Half-Blood began to rebuild, Percy found a moment of peace by the canoe lake, and Annabeth joined him, their hands intertwining naturally. "So, seaweed brain," she said, a smile playing at her lips. "What now?" Percy grinned, pulling her close. "I was thinking we could start with this," he said, and kissed her. As the sun set over Long Island Sound, Percy Jackson, hero of Olympus, savior of the world, and now finally boyfriend of Annabeth Chase, felt a sense of contentment wash over him. The prophecy had been fulfilled, the world had been saved, and for the first time in years, the future stretched out before him, full of possibilities. But even as he enjoyed this moment of peace, Percy knew that the life of a demigod was never truly calm. New quests, new dangers, and new adventures awaited. And whatever came next, he was ready to face it, with his friends by his side, riptide in his hand, and the courage of a true hero in his heart. The last Olympian had fallen, but Percy Jackson's story was far from over. As night fell over Camp Half-Blood, the campfire blazed high and bright, its flames reflecting the spirits of the demigods gathered around it. They had faced the end of the world and emerged victorious. Whatever the fates had in store for them next, they would meet it together, as heroes, as friends, as family. In the days that followed, Camp Half-Blood buzzed with activity. New cabins were being built to house the children of minor gods, fulfilling Percy's request to the Olympians. The Herm's cabin, once overflowing with unclaimed demigods, was now comfortably spacious. Percy found himself taking on a mentorship role, helping new campers adjust to their demigod lives. He remembered all too well how overwhelming it had been when he first arrived, and he was determined to make the transition easier for others. One afternoon, as Percy was teaching a group of younger kids how to handle a sword, he caught sight of Rachel Elizabeth Dare walking up Half-Blood Hill. The mortal girl who could see through the mist had played a crucial role in the Titan War, and now she was about to take on an even more important position. "All right, guys, that's enough for today," Percy told his students. "Remember, a hero's most important weapon isn't their sword, it's their mind. And maybe some ambrosia for emergencies." As the kids dispersed, chattering excitedly, Percy jogged over to meet Rachel. Her red hair was wild as ever, and her green eyes sparkled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Ready for the big moment?" Percy asked, falling into step beside her. Rachel took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be. It's not every day a girl becomes the Oracle of Delphi, you know." They made their way to the big house where Chiron and Mr. E were waiting. The process of Rachel becoming the new Oracle was both awe-inspiring and a little terrifying. Green mist swirled around her, and for a moment, Percy was afraid something had gone wrong. But when the smoke cleared, Rachel stood there, looking exactly the same except for the ancient wisdom now visible in her eyes. As summer drew to a close, Percy found himself standing on Half-Blood Hill once more, this time preparing to leave for the school year. It felt strange, almost wrong, to be returning to the mortal world after everything that had happened. And Annabeth came up beside him, her hand slipping naturally into his. "Having second thoughts about leaving?" she asked. Percy shook his head. "No, it's just, after facing Titans and saving Olympus, algebra doesn't seem quite as daunting anymore." And Annabeth laughed.